Our next Imagining the Future moderator will focus on resetting the financial future. Please welcome the CEO of Dynamic Planet, Kristin Rechberger.
Thank you, Amy, and hello, everyone. For this Earth Optimism Summit, we have a strand called Resetting Our Financial World. Economic recovery is a pressing topic in the time of COVID-19. Traditional economic growth has been seen as a great cost to the environment. As horrible as this global pandemic has been, can we learn from it and use it as an opportunity to build back better and reset our financial world too? We'll have more conversations on this topic tomorrow as well, so please tune in. But now we have with us David Blood. Mr. David Blood is co-founder and senior partner of Generation Investment Management. And with this Earth Optimism crowd, I can't help but say he's also co-chair of the World Resources Institute and on the board of On the Edge Conservation, which protects and promotes the world's most weird and wonderful endangered animals. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Kristin. Hi, and thank you very much for including us in what I think is just an amazing event.
Thanks. Well, we're really happy you're with us, and we wanted to chat with you a bit about your amazing venture for 16 years now. Since its founding in 2004, Generation has played an integral role in the development of sustainable investing and demonstrating the long-term commercial and societal benefits of your approach. What is sustainable investing, and how are Generation's values reflected in your investment framework?
Well, actually, in some ways, this is a difficult question to ask because we've never really thought sustainable investing to be anything other than investing. We've never thought that we were trading values for value. We've always thought that we were developing an investment framework that just made sense, was common sense. But in reality, it has three core planks, if you will. The first is that long-term investing is best practice. And therefore, everything we do has a long-term orientation, and that's particularly critical as we think about the challenges of climate and a just transition. But secondly, we believe that sustainability, broadly defined to include issues like the environment, issues like biodiversity, issues like climate change, as well as issues of social justice, fairness, poverty, and health, are driving economies, and it's very clear today that they're driving economies and therefore need to be understood in developing investment frameworks. And then lastly, environmental, social, and governance factors are tools to help us understand, within other traditional investment tools, how to understand what a company does and how a company does it. So as I said, we've always thought of this as in effect common sense. It's about delivering great risk-adjusted returns for our clients, but it includes the broader challenges of sustainability in understanding the context of business.
A lot of the issues you mentioned have changed quite a bit in the 16 years since you started. You were considered a first mover in 2004. What have you learned from these last decade and a half?
Well, we've learned a lot, actually. We've learned luck is a really good thing. We've certainly had our share of luck. But importantly, we've learned that it's really hard to invest, and we kind of knew that given our backgrounds as investors before we founded Generation. And sustainability is even harder still, because sustainability isn't really a tick box exercise, it's judgment, and it's assessing the multiple inputs around sustainability. So for example, what might make sense from an environmental perspective could be terrible from a community perspective or jobs, et cetera. And so it's important to factor in the holistic assessment of an issue in evaluating what the impact might be. But that said, it's become increasingly mainstream, as we've talked about in the past, and it's become mainstream because it makes sense and the business case is clearly robust. Now what we need to be focused on is, well, how do we make it better? How do we learn from our mistakes? How do we make it more rigorous, the sustainability framework, the incorporation of ESG, and how do we continue to drive the disclosure and best practice associated with sort of this broad way of thinking about investing and broader stakeholders?
And now we're in COVID-19 era. Has your strategy or outlook changed, or will it change, do you think?
No, our outlook hasn't changed because of the pandemic, and it's clearly a terrible, terrible tragedy. But it probably, if anything, makes us more, I guess, compelled to talk about the challenges and the urgency of transitioning to a more sustainable economy, one that is resilient, one that is fair, one that is healthy, and one that is no carbon. And the sort of output of, or the outcome of the last couple of months really shows why this is so important from a business perspective as well as a capital markets perspective. So if anything, we're really sort of driven to learn from these challenges and ultimately help build back better is the term that people are using around the economy, and how to think about businesses differently. This is a once in a century opportunity to think carefully about the relationship between capital, businesses, civil society, or us as consumers, as well as government. And this is critical that this challenge, this tragedy, is critical that we learn from it and we ultimately move towards as I said, a more robust economic footing.
You mentioned more, and it's true, sustainability and ESG factors are becoming more mainstream. How do we ensure that the rigor and standardization of metrics that are tied to ESG truly represent improvements?
It's a great question, Kristin. And prior to the pandemic, people were sort of falling all over themselves to make their commitments to sustainability and ESG widely known. You had the Business Roundtable, you've had the British Academy, you've had the World Economic Forum, the important investment management firm of BlackRock has all made these important commitments. And we've always felt that that's terrific, but words are one thing, but actions are going to be much more important. And what we fear is as folks make these commitments to sustainability, that we move towards sort of a lowest common denominator. We need exactly the opposite. We need to raise standards as we go forward. And now, actually, with the pandemic, what we fear is that there may be some folks who were really not that serious about their commitments to sustainability and broader stakeholder capitalism. And we'll find out very quickly about that. We'll know who are the pretenders and who are serious as we go forward. But we hope, and we actually believe, that most businesses, most investors are very carefully considering what are the implications of this pandemic. What does it mean to businesses and capital markets? And what does it mean to other challenges like climate change, like a just transition? And I would be very surprised if we just reverted back to the old. There may be some who will want us to revert back to the old, but I think the lessons that are being learned here, and just simple observation that we've all had to come together to stay well, to stay healthy, and to support our frontline care workers and others, will, I think, serve as great lessons as we begin to reflate our economies and, as I said, build back better.
ESG, the E, environment, and the ESG factors are usually considered, reducing carbon. Are there opportunities going forward where we can actually account for habitats and biodiversity to actually become nature neutral or even nature positive from our investments? Because in the past, nature's been free or a commodity, often tied to subsidies, and that's been difficult.
Well, Kristin, it's actually one of my favorite questions, because clearly when we're thinking about the challenges of a no carbon economy, climate change becomes the urgent issue, and indeed is urgent. But we really cannot forget the importance of clean air and the health associated with that. But as you said, the importance of biodiversity and the importance of the broader initiatives around conservation, including animal welfare and animal conservation. As you mentioned earlier, I feel very passionately about the on the edge animals, and that is a critical part of biodiversity. So there's an awful lot that needs to be incorporated in the broader E beyond even climate change, but they're all interlinked. Human health, planetary health, they're interlinked. They're the same subject. And incidentally, so is poverty and social justice. They're all really one coin, just different perspective, different sides.
Thanks so much. So as we wrap up in this incredibly disruptive time, what makes you optimistic?
I'm optimistic because we have the technology and importantly, I think the will to make change now. I actually am so excited about really getting back out there and really driving to help make a difference. And I believe that we will make a difference. Things will get right. We'll get right.
Thanks so much for being with us, David.